So what is real? What is reality like? What does reality contain? What are the kind of things that exist in reality? I may speculate that there are different sort of entities, things that exist. And some of those things that I say exist, I have evidence for their existence, and some I don't seem to have much evidence for their existence. Russell says that we are directly acquainted with sense data. We cannot doubt that in some sense we are in touch with the sense data that are presented to us in our ordinary experience all the time. We presume that those sense data proceed from what he calls matter, which is just physical objects. He has said that although he fully believes that we live in a world of matter, a world of physical objects, or real independent objects which are different from you and me, or independent of us, and that we can know them in some sense, that we can never actually prove to any sort of, in any kind of thorough way, we can't really prove that they exist. We can only presume, to a certain extent, in a common sense way, that the sense data that we are directly acquainted with indirectly give us some knowledge of physical objects. What is matter? I mean, we don't, the thing about the word matter is that, at least in our scientific education, we kind of think of matter as a sort of continuous sort of magnitude or amount of stuff. But truth is that matter doesn't present itself that way. Matter is, as Russell says, physical objects, and physical objects present themselves as discrete, particular things, and so we can say that when we say that it's probably true that the external world or the material world exists, we're also saying that we think it's probably true that particular things, physical objects, and in Russell's mind, not all particulars have to be material, but certainly the physical objects that surround us we presume are. These are all particular things, and in language we can pick out these particular things, give them names, or refer to them. For instance, when I say, use the expression, this water bottle, context tells you that my words refer to a particular thing in the world. My words, in a way, point to and stand for those things. If I say Barack Obama, I'm using words, and those words are a proper name that picks out a particular in the world, a particular human being. If I say the Eiffel Tower, I'm using a proper name, or is it a proper name? A proper name of the thing. I'm picking out something particular in the world. Or if I say the red balloon that I lost at the amusement park when I was 8 years old, I'm picking out a particular thing that at least used to exist. Not only words stand for things, particular things. But one of the things that Russell points out in this chapter, The World of Universals, is that actually very few of the words that we use actually attach to or pick out particular things like that. That in some sense, most of the words that we use don't stand for particulars at all. Now, I just used the expression the red balloon that I lost when I was 8 years old at the amusement park. Think about that expression, the red balloon, just that. Now, I was trying to think of or refer to a particular red balloon, but in trying to do that, I have made use of words which are not proper names, words which have general significance, general use, red and balloon. Now, when I use the word red, I can use it to describe particular things. When I use the word balloon, I can use it to describe particular things. But what about the words themselves, red and balloon? If I use the expression, the red balloon that I lost when I was 8 years old, that's an entire expression meant to pick out some particular thing in the world and to refer to it. But if I just think about the word red, I realize that word by itself and when I use it in an abstract way, say I use the word redness instead of red, make it into a noun. What does that stand for in itself? For instance, does the noun redness stand for anything? Well, it can't stand for any particular thing, because if we picked out any particular red thing, it would be rather arbitrary. In other words, if we picked out a red book, or a red fire hydrant, or a red stop sign, or a red lollipop. The word redness would seem to apply to all sorts of different things. Now, the way that Russell's thinking about it is that the word redness is just a word, it's just a sound, but it's a word that denotes something real, but not something real like the particular things like red balloons and particular red balloons and fire hydrants and stop signs. The thing that a word like redness stands for is a universal. Now, there's some ambiguity about whether the word redness is a universal or whether whatever it is that redness stands for, which would be a pure concept, is the universal, and maybe we can get into that. The idea of a universal is that a universal is something that can be used to describe any number of particular things. So the question is, do universals exist? Do they have independent existence, or are they just words that we use in everyday life? Well, Russell is committed to, and he fully admits this, what is generally the position of Plato, and that is that universals do exist. That is, there's some reference here to the kind of inquiry that Socrates went into and Plato went into. Plato would say, well, that man over there we say is just, and that woman over there we say is just, and that action there we say is just, and that action there we say is just. But all those things, all those people and actions that we call just, they're all particular things, and they all differ from each other. That is, that man is just, but he's different from that woman who's just, and that act of justice there is different from that act of justice there. Yet we all call them, we call them all by the same name, just. So what Socrates and Plato concluded, at least on the surface, apparently, was that over and above the particular just things, there must be something called justice itself, what Russell would call a universal, what Plato would call an idea or a form. Now, Plato thought that it was these concepts, these pure ideas that had no physical presence but were only thinkable, that were the truest and realest thing in the world. And to a certain extent, I think Russell really has a lot of sympathy for that. But one of the things that Russell is really insisting upon in this chapter is that universals are real. That is, there really is a concept of redness, and it exists independently of us. And we can be perhaps more sure of the independent existence of redness or justice or things like relations like beside or north of or the other relations that he talks about. We can be more sure of them than we can be sure of physical things. Because as he said, universals are things that we're directly acquainted with. We don't know them in indirect ways, like by description, like we know physical objects. So really, in a quite startling way, Russell has said that if you ask what is real, well, certainly he's going to admit that particulars, like especially particular objects, physical objects, are real, or we can't prove to the fullest extent that they're real. But just as real are certain non-physical things, which exist in a different way. In fact, he makes an interesting distinction at the end of this chapter between existence, which is what particulars have, and that's in time. They're in time and in a particular place, and they change, and they have histories, and so on. And being, that is existence, and on the other hand, being. And being is what he ascribes to things like universals, which are timeless. Think of, for instance, the concepts of mathematics, of logic, the notion that they're eternal and timeless. We'll pick this up in the next video.